News alert now. Get this. A Southwest flight, another one, forced to land this morning in Nashville after a bird strike.
That happening just one day after a Southwest plane's motor exploded midair, killed one passenger on board. The NTSB investigating now how it all happened.
The commercial pilot and senior editor at Flying Magazine, Rob Mark, is here. Rob, everyone's waking up terrified. People who have to catch flights or booking flights. I have so many questions for you. What's the safest seat to sit on or to sit in? And do we do the aisle seat, not the window seat?
Well, I think most of the seats are not really the issue. You know, there is, if anybody is concerned, maybe not sit at the window seat next to the front of the engine, but these kinds of occurrences are very, very rare.
They are indeed. How about the heroic driving by that former Navy fighter pilot from Kansas, Tammy Jo Schultz? I mean, she really did do an unbelievable job.
I think, too, when you listen to the audio, she sounds extremely calm. It's almost as if she's ordering carry-out at a restaurant, and it's all very matter-of-fact, but the two of the folks in the front did exactly what they needed to do, although I know when the airplane started to descend very quickly, it scared people, but that's what they're taught to do.
How does an engine blow a hole in the side of a plane? Reconstruct what we know right now.
Well, what we know, the NTSB was already on site. In fact, the NTSB chairman was in Philly yesterday looking at the engine, and they can already tell that it looks like there was some metal fatigue on the fan, which is the big fan in the front of the engine, and a piece let go. And when one piece lets go and an engine spinning as quickly as that, it sort of tore through the other pieces. And it's supposed to be able to be contained within that engine cowling, but somehow it got past it and punctured the fuselage window, and that's where all the chaos started.
Well, that's a very common turbofan motor that is used on that particular plane throughout American aviation as well. Given the fact that they apparently inspected that motor 2 days before, what does that tell you?
Well, I think it tells you that you can only inspect visually so much. I mean, if they had even seen the hint of a crack, they would have certainly taken the engine out of service. I mean, Southwest Airlines is the largest operator of the 737 with this motor. So, I mean, they really understand these engines well.
They do indeed. All right, Robert Mark, we thank you very much for joining us today from Chicago.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
We are remembering Barbara Bush this morning, the former First Lady who transcended politics and was loved by pretty much everyone. We are live outside of the Bush home in Houston at the top of the hour.
First Lady Barbara Bush passed away in Houston at 92 years old.
I have no fear of death because I know that there is a great God.
She walked the walk. She lived this life. She never apologized to anybody for who or what she was.
Mike Pompeo met with Kim Jong-un over Easter weekend in Pyongyang. The meeting, an effort to lay groundwork for a summit between Kim and President Trump.
I think that they have shaken the dictatorship so badly, they may get to a deal.
This is a Fox News alert.
The inspectors in Syria delayed because of gunfire.
What do you say to the families of victims of criminal illegal aliens?
For you to say that we don't care about victims, you have your Fox nonsense.
I've been gone for a year. I'm like a breakup he can't get over.
Life really must have joy. It's supposed to be fun.
Life is supposed to be fun. Life really must have joy, she said. America is mourning First Lady Barbara Bush, the woman known as America's grandmother.
All right, this is a live look at the White House right now, where flags are flying at half-staff, as we all remember her legacy.
And there's the house that she lived in for 4 years. The matriarch of the Bush dynasty passing away yesterday at the age of 92. She was surrounded by her family, and when she passed, she was holding her husband's hand.
And there's the American flag flying right behind us at Half Staff. And that's where we find Adam Housley. He is live down in Houston at their house as tributes are pouring in from both sides of the aisle. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Ainsley, it's really sinking in for a lot of people here, not only in Houston, but across Texas and across the country, and for that matter, around the globe. The former First Lady passed away here last night in the neighborhood behind me. As you mentioned, her husband of 73 years, far and away the longest presidential marriage in U.S. history, was at her side the entire day, holding her hand till the very end. We have a live look now of where she is. She is being kept in a nearby funeral home where arrangements have been made now for the rest of the week. You can see the flags flying there at Half Staff. In fact, around the city of Houston, when we came in last night, you can see them everywhere at Half Staff. The information we've been told is this, that Mrs. Bush will lie in repose eventually at St. Martin's Episcopal Church here in Houston, Texas on Friday. Funeral services will be on Saturday at the same church, followed by her burial at the Bush Presidential Library in College Station, Texas. Her final resting place, of course, will be there next to her daughter, Robin. All sorts of tributes coming in. The first one's, of course, coming from her family. George W. Bush, in part, said last night, Laura, Barbara, Jenna, and I are sad, but our souls are settled because we know hers was. Barbara Bush was a fabulous First Lady and a woman unlike any other who brought levity, love, and literacy to millions. Jeb Bush, the former governor of Florida, her son, also one of her other sons, says, quote, I'm exceptionally privileged to be the son of George Bush and the exceptionally gracious, gregarious, fun, funny, loving, tough, smart, graceful woman who was the force of nature known as Barbara Bush. Also across the aisle and from all sorts of politicians who knew the Bushes, former President Clinton saying in part, quote, our hearts and prayers go out to President Bush and to the entire Bush family she loves so much. We know that through them, her remarkable strength, warmth, wit, and her devotion to our country will live on. Former President Carter saying she touched the hearts of millions with her warmth, generosity, and keen wit, the matriarch of a family dedicated to serving. Former President Obama weighing in, saying we'll always be grateful to Mrs. Bush for the generosity she showed us throughout our time in the White House, but we're even more grateful for the way she lived her life as a testament to the fact that public service is an important and noble calling. And that is what we're hearing from everybody. As we give it back to you guys in New York, you guys have talked about the memories that you had. I heard her speak when I was in college and remember the speech being incredibly witty, incredibly funny. And in fact, a lot of people that as college students might be skeptical sitting around me at the end, she'd won them all over. So that's the stories. Those are the stories that are coming in from so many people, guys. And we'll continue to hear those throughout the day today and for that matter for the rest of the week and on in the future as people remember such a remarkable lady.
That's right, Adam. All right, thank you very much. People were listening to her college age because she reminded everybody of their grandmother. But you think about the political family she came from. Her father's name was Marvin Pierce. He was a direct descendant of the 14th president of the United States, Franklin Pierce. And then she eventually married a man who would become president, and one of her children would eventually become president as well. And her entire family is filled with family members who have given their life to public service.
Well, think about the love that they had. The two of them created such a large family, 4 sons, 2 daughters. Her daughter Robin died in 1953 of leukemia. Burying your child who is 3 years old and going through that experience, she said the key to it was laughter. She and her husband laughed through the tears, she said. And I can only imagine, as a Christian, I believe she's in heaven. And she said she knew she was going to heaven. I'm sure she's holding her daughter now.
She describes she named one of her sons Marvin, and why the first son wasn't named Marvin is because her father hated the name Marvin. And then finally he says, please don't do that, because I'm doing it anyway. When he finally told her father, I'm naming him after you, he got emotional because he wanted to scare him off, but he obviously was moved by it. And I think one of the reasons that we know so much about her and most people can reflect on her is because she was in the public limelight for so long. I mean, George Bush was a war hero by the time he was 19 years old. And then when it was time for him to get a career going, she basically was at home with 6 kids, keeping everything together, not living in the life of luxury. And then it became a life of service. Remember, he was CIA director, didn't see him for a long time. He goes to China as an ambassador. They experienced that for a while. And then when they come back and she becomes the second lady and then the first lady, and then they don't get renewed for another 4 years, she goes back and becomes a civilian. And she talks about learning to drive for the first time in 12 years. And our George W. Bush, the future president, would say, everyone in the neighborhood said, look out for the woman with the blue Sable, because she was a terrible driver. She had to learn to cook for the first time in a long time. And next thing you know, she is back at Inauguration Day, and it's her son
Sure.
who is getting the oath of office. And she looks over there, and there's Bill Clinton. And she looks behind, and there's Al Gore. And she looks at Al Gore, and she says, I can imagine what he's feeling because I remember what my husband felt.
Well, apparently she was tough as nails. She was born in New York, but they lived exactly right, New York, and she lived, I believe, in 24 different cities, 24 cities, because he was in the military before they decided to settle down in Texas.
They moved around a lot, and she was very popular after the Bushes left the White House. Adam Housley was talking about how she came to his college graduation and spoke. One of the most famous college commencement speeches ever was when she was at Wellesley. I believe it was 1990. It was carried on all 3 of the networks, and this is a little bit of what she had to say that day up there in Wellesley.
Decisions are not irrevocable. Choices do come back. And as you set off from Wellesley, I hope that many of you will consider making 3 very special choices. The first is to believe in something larger than yourself, to get involved in some of the big ideas of our time. And early on, I made another choice, which I hope you'll make as well. Whether you're talking about education, career, or service, you're talking about life, and life really must have joy. The third choice that must not be missed is to cherish your human connections, your relationships with family and friends.
And that could be why she wanted to be at home with her family and friends at the end.
Yeah, she had a very strong faith. We interviewed Reverend Franklin Graham, and he recounts a story of when he sat down with her. Watch this interview. It's pretty touching.
I remember a number of years ago my father telling me that he got a phone call one evening, and Barbara Bush and George W. at that time, he wasn't president, as while George H. was president, had a lively discussion about how you get to heaven. And George W. was explaining to his mother that only born-again people are going to get to heaven. She said, "Get me Billy Graham." So the White House operator called my father and got him on the phone, and she explained the conversation. And my father said, well, only God is the judge of one's soul. And I believe Mrs. Bush, and no question, she knew God.
Well, he also sat down with her for an interview, and I was so impressed because she said she and her husband prayed every single night together and would take turns. Who's going to pray out loud? She said she did not have a fear of death. She knew she was going to heaven.
Well, she was a remarkable woman. At the 25th anniversary of the Barbara Bush Foundation Family Literacy Program, they invited Fox and Friends down to Houston to that house, and I sat down with her a little bit, and we had a wide-ranging conversation. Here's a little bit of it. Let's go back long before you were First Lady. I understand you were jogging in Memorial Park here in Houston, and you were thinking, you know, what can I do to make a difference? And you came up with reading.
Literacy.
Literacy.
And I still feel the same way about it. But we changed our focus from adult literacy, which is what we originally did, to family literacy, feeling that if the mother and the child learn together, it just makes such a difference. Just the fact that we're in 50 states and we were not in one state when we started. There were no programs before, and now we're in 50 states, and we've given away, I think, $60 million.
As you look back, which of the stages has been mom, grandma? What's really been satisfying?
All of them. Mom, I loved. You know, we had babies so early that I could play golf with George W. and throw him off the golf course for profanity. And, I mean, I think we're very, very close, George and I, because we did a lot of things together as young mother. Yeah. And we went through some very tough times, too, and he was my hero, still is. That hurts when people criticize George W., and don't ever dare do it in front of me. Yeah. Or behind me.
You are one of the most widely admired women in the world. And I was trying to think, why? I'll tell you why.
Never mind. Don't answer.
No, I'm going to tell you why.
Don't tell me that.
You're a straight shooter. You say what's on your mind.
I've given that up for Lent.
Everyone said
Always
she
funny.
couldn't take a compliment. She didn't like being complimented. They were very humble.
Yeah, they were very down to earth. And there's one story that she said when after George H.W. Bush got a knighthood from the Queen, he came back home and he says, "What does it feel?" He goes, "How does it feel to be married to a knight, a real live knight?" My answer was, "Get the coffee, Sir George." So the last time I had a chance to see Bush 41 and Mrs. Bush was at the Super Bowl. She's being wheeled into the tunnel, and I happened to be sitting right there as they waited because they were going to go and toss the coin in Houston, which meant so much to them. And so I was able to sit there. They just happened to pull up when I was there right in the tunnel, and they wait for their introduction. And the crowd went as crazy as they did after the New England Patriots won. And they were just moved by it, and they were thrilled by it as if it was their first public event. And I just couldn't believe how, I mean, they were still on their game, and you see the players giving the respect.
Look at that. They all respect him. He is the President of the United States of America.
That's right.
And she was by his side through it all.
Absolutely. And after they left the White House, they moved down to a beautiful little neighborhood not too far from the center of Houston. They would spend half their year there, and then they would spend half their year up in Kennebunkport in Maine as well, right out there at Walker Point. All right. Anyway, we're going to continue to remember Barbara Bush throughout today's telecast. Email us. Let us know what you remember best. Meanwhile, in other news, James Comey now comparing President Trump to a crazy ex.
He's tweeted at me probably 50 times. I've been gone for a year. I'm like a breakup he can't get over.
Mark Steyn can't get over Comey, and Mark Steyn is coming up.
All right. Plus, Democrats hold a tax day march to show the president's tax plan isn't working. But one hardworking American has proved the Dems are wrong. He'll join us.
Brian, they're crumbs.
Oh.
And we'll remember the life and legacy of the former First Lady, Barbara Bush.
Not picture.
Is in their interest, and that is because of all of you. It's a scam. And why is it a scam? Look at this. They put forth a tax bill that gives 83% of the benefits to the top 1%. It's wrong, and we cannot let it stand.
Nancy Pelosi and some other fellow progressives rallying at a tax day march yesterday in D.C., trying to discredit the president's tax reform bill. But our next guest, a business owner out in Vegas, claims he, Mr. Trump, is proof that they are wrong, and also his business as well. Wes Carnes is the owner of WC Welding Services. He joins us right now from Las Vegas. Wes, thanks very much for being with us.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing okay, but the Democrats yesterday were demanding an end to Trump tax, which they say will raise taxes for 92 million middle-class families. But at your business, as I understand, the taxes resulted in a 20% increase in your employees' benefits and wages, right?
Well, what happened is the competition for jobs, the upswing and the confidence and attitude that we've had has allowed us to raise our wages. It's allowed us to make investments that we normally couldn't make.
Right.
This has been a windfall for our industry.
Sure. Now, one of the things that you were talking to me during the commercial about is the fact that you do appreciate this president, and he's trying to cut regulations to make it easier to operate in this country. But you say he's also going after China, which you appreciate because they are stealing us, robbing us blind when it comes to the theft of intellectual property. Explain what you mean.
Okay, we have a particular invention that enhances the efficiencies in underbalanced drilling, and it has a need overseas. We're scared to take it overseas to some clients and friends that we know there in China because the Chinese are simply going to steal our technology. And just, it's wrong. We made the investment in the research and development here in this country, and we legally own that and should be able to retain that.
Okay. Wes, what's your message to Democrats in Washington yesterday who are trying to get rid of the tax cut that is helping you and your employees?
I can't believe that you would march and protest something that's going to bring investment in this country, higher paying jobs, better American jobs, why would you protest more American jobs? I can't add that up.
Well, maybe because they feel like maybe they're on the wrong side of the whole thing and they got to try to make some political capital because it ain't working for them right now. Wes, thank you very much for joining us today from Las Vegas and telling your story.
Thank you, sir.
All right, good enough. All right, 8:20 now here in New York City. The media blitz continues. James Comey now comparing President Trump to a crazy ex last night on late night TV. Mark Stein, come on in. Mark, you're next. He's all fired up about that, and he's with us next.
At the end of your life, you will never regret not having passed one more test, winning one more verdict, or not closing one more deal. You will regret time not spent with a husband, a child, a friend, or a parent.
There is more to life than work. Joining us right now, we've got Mark Stein, who's joining us.
Working?
He is working, but not very hard.
No.
Mark,
8 days a year, I think. Something like that.
One thing about the Bushes, the Bush families, they were classy. They are a classy family. And she's the leader.
Well, that's true, but she actually had a dignity about her. She was secure in her sense of herself. She didn't think first ladies needed to be hip on pop culture or anything like that. She knew who she was. But at the same time, she was also very emotional. I remember a friend of mine back in New Hampshire who was 8 months pregnant, and Barbara Bush rubbed her belly in a very affectionate way, which is an intimate thing to do. And ever after, my pal drove around with an I Miss Barbara Bush bumper sticker on the back of her mommy van. But the thing about that is it's the balance. People want a dignified first lady who also connects with you individually. And she found that sweet spot in a way that very few first ladies have done in recent times.
I have a theory on that, and that is because if you look at her upbringing in Midland, Texas, when she became a mom, and raising her kids, people think the Bushes are just loaded, they have tons of money. But they had a middle-class upbringing. She was driving to Little League practice. Her car was beat up, 6 kids, husband working 2 or 3 jobs. She can relate to the average American, even though she's coming from a very prestigious family.
Yeah, she was a blue blood who was not isolated from the currents of American life. And I love the way she just wore what she wore. Nobody ever said, well, at this state banquet for the King of Sweden, will she be wearing Versace or will she be wearing Prada? She just wore what she wore.
A blue dress and pearls.
Yeah, and the way her, as I understand it, which is a tragic story, her hair turned prematurely grey when her daughter died, and she kept it. She kept it like that. It's absolutely remarkable, actually, at that level in American public life, to be so secure in your sense of yourself.
To embrace who you are and be okay with it and not try to change yourself. I felt like, too, she was a strong woman. In that generation, I feel like they were more subservient, and she just was so strong, and I feel like the whole family looked to her. She was stalwart and strong and had her own opinions and beliefs.
Yeah, it's a fun, because they made and you have to feel, the pain of her husband, because no matter how old someone is and how good a life they've led, to be without someone for the first time in 3/4 of a century.
Today's the first full day.
Is an absolutely terrible thing. They looked at like a kind of rather odd couple because she went prematurely grey and maternal, and he still had, until comparatively recently, that sort of goofy, gangly, boyish,
jumping out of planes.
Yeah, slightly inarticulate thing. She was, and so in a sense, that maternal role, that kind of mother of the nation type thing she had going on, you could actually physically see it even when he was vice president. Right. It was there.
So, Mark, there's no question about it. This is the #1 story, but the James Comey book tour can't be ignored. Last night, he took the tie off and wanted to try to be the cool guy with Stephen Colbert, who I don't know if you know, tends to not like the president. See how he was welcomed and see his theory on why President Trump tweets about him.
He's tweeted at me probably 50 times. I've been gone for a year. I'm like a breakup he can't get over.
You think he's describing that accurately?
No, I think James Comey he is dating himself, and I think that's actually the problem. It's that
dating himself.
He's basically in love with himself. Lanny Davis, who I don't agree on with anything, but he said on your show, it's what was that? I think that's Lanny's Carmen Miranda impression. I love me very much, and that's basically. It's actually, it's again, going back to what we were talking about with Barbara Bush, it's about seamliness in a role. How this guy ever became director of the FBI. He seems psychologically unfit, and he's interested in himself. I think this book will be one of those kind of 4-week phenomena that's like forgotten.
Although it's affecting the investigation. We'll talk about that another time.
It's affecting the president because obviously he's impacted by it. He tweeted this morning about Mr. Comey. Here it is. Slippery James Comey, the worst FBI director in history, was not fired because of the phony Russia investigation, where, by the way, there was no collusion except by the Dems.
Yeah, anyone would have fired him. If Hillary had won, she'd have fired him. If Jeb had won, he'd have fired him. If Bernie had won, he'd have fired Comey. The real question here is why Obama didn't fire Comey.
He seems to be enjoying this, though, doesn't he? No tie, comes out there. Now he's just, all these interviews are becoming easier and easier. We're going to interview him, though. Brett Baer's interviewing him. It's going to air next week.
Well,
I'll ask him some tough questions.
I dispute that simply in 2018 not wearing a necktie is enough to transform a self-obsessed narcissistic dork into the biggest hipster on the planet.
How do you really feel?
No, I don't. I'd take my tie off if it was that easy, but sometimes you got to know. Yeah, and that comes back to what we were saying about Barbara Bush. You got to be secure in the sense of, it's pathetic to see, people used to mock these apocryphal stories about J. Edgar Hoover wearing a dress. J. Edgar Hoover isn't dumb enough to think, oh, simply by taking my tie off, I'm a rock star. That's ridiculous.
All right, the great Mike.
Good point. We have not talked about her, J. Edgar Hoover wearing a dress in a while.
Well,
it was good.
That's an apocryphal. I don't believe that's ever been. When James Comey comes out in a dress, I'll take an interest in his book.
Absolutely.
That will be a Fox News alert.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, coming up. Thanks a lot, Mark Stein. All right, more on the passing of Barbara Bush. We were just discussing that, and we'll do it with Dana Perino. She served as President George W. Bush's press secretary and remembers the former First Lady well.
Plus, a sanctuary showdown between Governor Jerry Brown and Griff Jenkins, a confrontation from D.C. yesterday.
What do you say to the families of victims of criminal illegal aliens?
For you to say that we don't care about victims, you had your Fox nonsense.
Fox News alert. Overnight, 3 more California communities joining more than a dozen others in the fight against the state's sanctuary policies.
President Trump already tweeting this morning, quote, "There is a revolution going on in California. So many sanctuary areas want out of this ridiculous and crime and infested and breeding concept, that is to say. Jerry Brown is trying to back out of the National Guard at the border, but the people of the state are not happy. They want security and safety now."
All right, despite that backlash, Governor Jerry Brown is still making it difficult for ICE to do a job and combat illegal immigration. Our own Griff Jenkins was confronting the governor, who decided to go to Washington, D.C. to explain himself. But first, he had to deal with Griff. Hey, Griff.
Good morning. Yeah, California is very much at a crossroads. San Diego is just the latest in what is a growing state rejection against the sanctuary law. Yet Governor Brown was here in Washington making the case for it, and he was feeling the pressure when I asked him about it. The leaders of these local communities, from mayors to sheriffs, are saying that your law favors the rights of criminal illegal aliens over the rights and the safety of those communities. Your response?
Absolutely false. And I'd like to see a scintilla of evidence that would support such an outlandish Fox proposition.
Well, hold on. That's not a Fox proposition.
We've heard of fake news. We have Fox News, too.
The director of ICE, David Marin, in L.A., said that the 6-year-old girl in February that was killed in Fullerton, Grace Aguilera, he says that before your law, SB 54, would have been prevented, that illegal criminal alien had previous DUIs and would have been handed over, and that might not have happened. Well, the governor may not spend enough time talking to local ICE leaders because we do, and here's what they told us.
He was arrested for a DUI. Unfortunately, they could not honor our detainer. They had to let that individual go. 3 years later, he kills this poor little girl. If California politicians allowed them to work with us, we would be able to prevent these type of crimes.
And after the exchange, guys, I asked the governor if he had anything to say to the families of the victims of illegal criminal aliens since this law has taken effect in January. Watch this.
That's a lie. You know why? I don't know if you have an open mind here, but there's nothing that stops any local official from notifying ICE that people are about to be released. This is a matter of public record. Your example, I'd like to see that. A lot of people, they make very inflammatory remarks, but usually when you study it, that's not the case.
Would you consider, if you keep seeing the growing backlash against the law, that maybe a line has been crossed? Are you open to change?
Well, look, this was a carefully drawn statute that was radically changed from its original introduction. But no law is perfect. In some ways, these lawsuits will help clarify it. So I think it's pretty close to what it ought to be, but we'll see what the judges say, and if the cities want to come in, that's fine. But look, let's be honest. There's a lot of politics in this, on all sides. I tried to carve a path down the middle to respect our immigrants, to respect our border, and to respect our law.
What do you say to the families of victims of criminal illegal aliens who say that had the law not been in place, they wouldn't have this crime?
I think Fox News exploits this issue. We have criminals that do horrible things all the time. Which ones may be documented, which ones are obligated to look at that. But we have a very strong law enforcement community in the state. And I think to scapegoat the immigrants by these very biased stories, I don't think... Look,
with all due respect, you have more than a dozen communities...
With all due respect, I want to protect people. And for you to say that we don't care about victims is really a culminate. You had your Fox nonsense, Governor.
Finally, we should note that the law also puts ICE agents in greater danger and at risk having to go into the communities where these illegal criminal aliens have been released. Beforehand, they were handed over in a safe transfer. Guys?
Makes it a lot harder to do their job. All right, Griff, thank you very much.
Great job. Thanks,
Good job.
Meanwhile, Maria Bartiromo went over to Dallas to speak at a leadership conference, which I understand she played a major role in organizing. She was on the schedule to speak with the 43rd President of the United States. And now, with the passing of his mother, the former First Lady, Barbara Bush, it was a real poignant time to be talking to him. Here's a little of that interview.
But I told her I loved her. And here's the thing. She had great faith. She truly believes that there's an afterlife, that she'll be wonderfully received in the arms of a loving God, and therefore did not fear death. And as a result of her soul being comforted on the deathbed, my soul is comforted.
Well, look at that.
Strong.
And so they're at the George Bush Center at SMU. They're going to go ahead and have that later today. He was answering the question. So tell me about the last conversation you had with your mother. He was not at her deathbed, but had been contacting and talking to her right up until the end.
Wow, she said her greatest joy was being a mother. You asked her did you ask her what she liked better, being a mother or grandmother or great-grandmother? And she said a mother. And she was extremely close to him because she said, I was so young when I had him. We were at every event together. What a remarkable woman. Laura was wearing her pearls. Did you notice that? They're such a strong family.
They are indeed.
Meanwhile, 20 minutes before the top of the hour, other news is taking place today in a very busy news morning. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning. And we've been following a number of stories, so let's get you caught up with this Fox News alert. One day after an engine blew up in midair, a Southwest plane is forced to land for a bird strike. No one is hurt. The jet landed safely back in Nashville. And we also now know the woman killed in Tuesday's Southwest explosion was a mother of two. Jennifer Riordan was pulled waist up out of the plane when a window shattered in the blast. Fellow passengers raced to pull her back inside. The plane then making an emergency landing in Philadelphia. Passengers reliving those horrifying moments.
As the plane was just going down, we literally just felt like we were just falling from the sky. I looked to my left and the engine's just totally done.
Tammy Jo Schultz, a former Navy pilot, being hailed a hero for safely landing the plane. The NTSB is investigating. GOP Congressman Ron DeSantis demanding the DOJ investigate Hillary Clinton, James Comey, and several Obama-era officials for possible crimes. The House Judiciary Committee member joined us earlier with the exclusive details.
Has some serious issues with candor with Congress, obviously the classified information. McCabe is now a documented liar under oath. The lack of candor with the Congress is something that needs to be investigated.
DeSantis says around a dozen committee members have backed his letter. Let's look at your headlines. I'll send it back to you.
Criminal referral, that's big. All right, thank you very much, Jillian. Straight ahead, a bombshell revelation. We didn't see this coming. Apparently, CIA Director Mike Pompeo sat down with Kim Jong-un in a secret meeting. The president has weighed in officially, and we will tell you what he's saying next.
Plus, Dana Perino served as President George W. Bush's press secretary. She joins us to remember the former First Lady, Barbara Bush.
But I told her I loved her. And here's the thing. She had great faith. She truly believes that there's an afterlife, that she'll be wonderfully received in the arms of a loving God, and therefore did not fear death. And as a result of her soul being comforted on the deathbed, my soul is comforted.
Moments ago, former President George W. Bush weighing in on the death of his mother and her legacy in that exclusive interview.
Dana Perino, you know her. She served as press secretary to George W. Bush, close personal friend of the Bush family, joins us right now live. Of course, you worked in the administration of George W. Bush.
Yes.
What would happen when his father came to town?
Well, when the 41s came to town, 41 would come over to see the press secretary's office, and he'd say, "Is the boss around?" And he loved to catch up on the press and, we'll gossip a little bit.
Sure.
But I also remember my good friend, Jeannie Mamo. She ran media affairs for us, and she had asked Barbara Bush, when she was in town, if she would be willing to do a literacy PSA and record that. Jeannie got a call in the morning. Barbara Bush is not feeling well. She has the flu. Jeannie said, "I totally understand. It's fine." They said, "No, she's coming. It's just so you know, she's just feeling a little tired, but we're going to be there. We're going to do it." She does the PSA, and Jeannie says, "Ma'am, thank you so much for doing this. I'm just afraid that I'm going to get fired because I had you do this while you had the flu." And Barbara Bush said, "Jeannie, don't worry. He may be the president, but I'm still his mother."
That's great. That is great. I remember I was anchoring Fox and Friends on the weekend, and Tony Snow had just passed away. And she called, Barbara Bush called with her husband, President Bush, and they said, "We're lying in bed. We just learned the news by watching Fox and Friends." And they wanted to remember Tony and say some nice things about him. And then you ended up getting the job after that. What was that experience like?
Well, it was Tony Snow was such a remarkable press secretary in many ways, but a wonderful human in every way. And people that knew him as I did as a colleague, or him as a father, an amazing father and a terrific friend to lots of people. And Barbara Bush and George Bush had a very wonderful way of making sure that everybody felt special. They had an amazing capacity for love. She wanted to be known as a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. But she's so much more, and I think you see that today. It is wonderful to see in today's day and age, everyone lifting up the memory of Barbara Bush and a life of such great consequence.
And great-grandmother. And by the way, President Bush, 43, spoke about the last time he spoke to his mom, had kind of a funny story with Maria.
There's a lot of condolences pouring in, and Laura and I and our entire family are very grateful for people's prayers and sympathies. It's it's the end of a beautiful life. We had a wonderful visit. She was strong, lucid.
Funny still.
Funny. She and I were needling each other, and the doctor came in, and she turned to the doctor and said, "You want to know why George W. is the way he is?" And the doctor looked somewhat surprised. She said, "Because I drank and smoked when I was pregnant with him."
And the story out in Houston is that apparently right there on her deathbed, surrounded by her family, she was sipping a bourbon.
I know one of my favorite things is that George Bush used to say, with all due affection, I got my daddy's eyes and my mama's mouth.
Yeah.
And both things, used to get him in trouble, both Barbara Bush and George W. Bush. Very close. He's stalwart, right? They're dignified. This is a family that he's willing to show his emotions, but I do think that underneath, he's roiling inside. He was the firstborn son. He was there when Robin, his little sister, died, which was so traumatic for the family. But they've all gone on to do amazing work for public service and taught me a lot about loyalty and how it goes both ways.
Best story, best memory that comes to mind.
Well, she came to do a minute mentoring event of mine in Houston, and I asked her to do it, and she said, well, why would you want me? I've never worked a day in my life. And she was kind of joking, but, and all that she did, she never earned a paycheck. And when she was there, she said she talked to George and to me, and that loyalty goes both ways, and she was right.
You're going to get great insight at 2 o'clock today and then on the 5. Dana, thanks
Harlan
so much.
Coben joining as well.
Oh, that would be great.
All right.
Thanks, Dana.
We're going to step aside. Back in 2 minutes.